Hello, thank you for stopping by the channel. Today I'm looking at Spy vs. Spy 2, the Island Caper for the Nintendo Famicom, and it was originally released back in 1985 on a whole bunch of different systems. Kemco bought the rights to this and released the Famicom version in 1987. Now, Spy vs. Spy 2 is obviously a sequel, and it was made for a handful of different systems, but not the North American NES for some reason. This is something I find particularly strange, considering Spy vs. Spy was from Mad Magazine, and I honestly thought that Mad Magazine was a really American thing. Plus, the first game was pretty fun, but this one got no NES version. Maybe the NES original didn't sell enough. Who knows? But this being a Japanese-only Famicom release is okay, because there really isn't much text to read in this game, and it can be played just as fine as it is, so it works. I guess the only real problem I ran into was that the Famicom manual is not in English. So you kinda need to read a manual from a different version, sort of, to figure things out, and it honestly wasn't that easy. It took me a while to figure out how to make things work. But once you get there, it's pretty good. The game also has a really awesome looking dark blue cartridge with some great graphics on the front. I'm a fan of these Famicom games. I love the size, I love how they're different colors, I love the graphics, and I always wondered why the US games stuck with that terrible, boring gray. I love having all these different colors. Now, the game operates in the same fashion as the first Spy vs. Spy game, so if you played that one, this one isn't that far off. You have two spies fighting it out, one black, one white. You're working against a timer, you have a map at a specific size, and you have a goal to get something and escape. Now, for this game specifically, you are on an island, and you have to locate and assemble 3 pieces of a top-secret missile. Once you get the missile assembled, you need to escape the island in a submarine. And of course, you have to do all this while the other spy is trying to do the exact same thing. You're going to be working against each other and a timer. If one of you is killed, you will respawn, but it takes time. I think it's 30 seconds. And during that time, as you would imagine, your opponent is racing to get ahead of you. Now, to kill your opponent, you can, of course, go toe-to-toe. Both spies, when they're on the same screen, you can run through a good old round of fisticuffs. It's this glorious and awkward animation that's kind of perfect for the Famicom, and there isn't too much more you can do but mash your buttons, and that's you punching. Maybe you could try to dodge and approach the attack again, but it's hard to say if there's a good strategy here. It's mostly intense button pushing. You can kill your opponent also by using the classic Spy vs. Spy trope of traps. You have a handful of traps at your disposal that you can deploy, and hopefully that will help you incapacitate your opponent. And this is where it gets a little rough. Through a bunch of trial and error, I think I have the traps figured out, but like I said, the manual is totally in Japanese, and finding exact information on how these traps work is a little hard to come by. Now, not all Spy vs. Spy 2 games in this pile from these different systems are actually the same, and honestly, it appears the Famicom port is likely the one that's possibly the least complex of the lot. Other versions have different interfaces, maybe extra traps. I think it might be easier on other consoles. But here, the A button is your interact button, and if you press it, you're going to search the ground right in front of you. If there's a depression in the sand, there might be something there, so you can search it. However, some traps look exactly like this, so you're always taking a little bit of a chance. The A button will also have you jump if you are in the middle of running, and you can run by holding the B button down. You also scroll through your inventory using the B button, and you press it quickly and you'll scroll through all your traps and then eventually your map. The scroll order is shovel, snare, coconut, mine, and then map. When you switch all the way to the map, the screen is going to go black for a split second. It also shifts to black for a second when somebody moves onto another screen. This is a little annoying, but you do get used to it, so it's not too bad. Understanding exactly how you can use these traps, I think, is the tough part. You're probably going to want to put it on a solo, you versus another opponent, and just have the other opponent not do anything, so you can practice for a while. You really got to figure out how these are supposed to work, so you know what to use when. The question becomes then, are you going to race to the missile parts right away, or try to set up traps and then do that? Well, that's up to you, of course, but I seem to get through this game with setting remarkably few traps. Mostly because scrolling through your inventory and setting up these traps takes time. and if you're in one place setting these traps, your opponent could be racing ahead. Back to the traps here. You successfully set a trap when you perform an action and an animation runs. Your avatar laughs. That's good. That means you set the trap successfully. However, you do need to remember where you set your traps, because you can trigger your own trap and kill yourself. The first trap we start with is the shovel. The shovel is the first option on the list, and when you press the A button when this is selected, you dig a hole. You can leave the hole as it is and walk away, of course, but you can also press A to dig and then A again to cover up the top of the hole. So if somebody goes to search it or they walk over it, they're going to fall inside a pit. It works, and it's pretty easy to deploy because it's the first one in the list. Trap 2 is the snare, and you need to lasso a palm tree to set this one. I find this one to be the toughest one to really figure out. You're going to want to practice for a while. You can't lasso the background trees, only the freestanding ones where you're walking, and you kind of need to aim the end of your snare to the very top center of the palm tree leaves. When I finally managed to set it once, I decided it's probably too much effort for me to use reliably. The third trap is the coconut. You'll need to select the coconut, climb a palm tree, and when you're at the top, you press A to set the coconut and the branches. If somebody walks underneath the branches, the coconut falls and knocks them out. The fourth trap is the mine, and you just select it and press A to set it in the sand. The strange thing is, I don't know how many of these mines you can actually set. I set 5 or 6 of these, and it let me, so there may not be much of a limit there. I don't know. It works, it's just, I think, because you have to select it fourth in the list, it takes too long to get to it for me to actually find it that useful. Then, of course, you have the map. The map shows you the outline of the island that you're on and where the missile parts are located. You kind of need to make your choice. Do you hunt down a piece of the missile, or do you try to run into the other spy? In my gameplay, I'm kind of finding that if I set a ton of traps, that might not be the best way for me to go about this. Not against the computer anyway. Maybe it's different against the player, but against the computer, sitting around setting tons of traps doesn't seem to be that beneficial. This footage is me playing against the computer, and I won a few times in a row. First few times I actually played this game, the computer totally wiped me out, but you kind of get the hang of it after you set some traps and start seeing how things are going. You can employ different approaches, I suppose, like waiting for the missile to be assembled for you, and then trying to kill your opponent and running off with the assembled pieces. That actually works sometimes, it's not bad. All the levels are differently sized and shaped, and they actually start having more detail than I was expecting. On some of them you get these tiki statues that have these tunnels in them and you can run through them, and it kind of moves you to a different part of the map. It's pretty neat. And there are some log bridges in some areas, and some of the water actually has sharks in it. I find this to be actually pretty fun once you get past the awkwardness of setting traps. I think it's one of those, though, that might be better if you're playing and taunting a friend at the same time. If you're playing in the same room, I think that's good for some fun. I think most important is to remember to press and hold the B button to run, because this really helps you get around. Based on my research for this game, which is a game that I do like, I do think that some of the other versions are probably going to be better. I'm going to track down some of those variations and see what they're like. There's also a Spy vs. Spy 3 in this series, and there are some other Spy vs. Spy games out there. I know there's an Xbox version out there and a PS2 game. I think there's a DS game. I'm sure they're all totally different, but it turns out this franchise is far larger in the video game space than I originally thought. Well, that's all I have today for Spy vs. Spy 2: The Island Caper for the Famicom. Thanks for stopping by to watch, and please like and subscribe if this is your sort of thing. Hope to catch you on another video.